As I begin this recording, a friendly reminder to please keep your audio and video disabled at all times. Nothing you put in the chat box will appear in the recording. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Maggie, you're welcome to take over.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Brooke, and thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Maggie Grueskin, and welcome to our third episode this year in our OptimizeU series, where we're looking at OptimizeU and the letter U, which stands for the two concepts of we're all here as universal vibrating energies having this human experience. So how do we show up meeting both our universal needs of things like food and clothing and shelter and sleep that we're going to get into today, as well as exploring and being curious about, I'm unique. How do I show up in this world, in this life, in my body? And how do I meet my universal needs in a way that corresponds to my unique needs? So with that, today we're going to delve into, and I'm so happy to talk about this very timely topic, if you're joining us live today, on the topic of sleep. And my esteemed colleague, Dr. Frederick Brown, who will join us in just a moment, will be sharing some of his research that he has done at Penn State and over 30 years of teaching some amazing work on positive psychology. But before that, we always want to know who's with us. So we invite you to type in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. Are you here from San Antonio? And if this is your first time joining us, please let us know if this is your first time. If you're from elsewhere, let us know the city, the country, where you're calling in from, where you're joining in. And then since this is the topic of the day, which is about sleep, I'd love to invite you to also now type in, how many hours of sleep do you get in? Are you getting 5, 6, 7, 10 hours of sleep? Just type in the chat. Oh yeah, some people are getting 7 to 9. We've got some people that are local, so welcome everybody. I see some new friends. Thank you so much for joining here. So without further ado, let me just tell you a little bit about our guest speaker today. Dr. Frederick Brown is a research scientist, a licensed clinical hypnotherapist, and a positive well-being educator. I've had the privilege of serving with him in the Leaders Forum of the International Positive Psychology Association for the past 2 years. Now, from his work, his PhD was from the University of Virginia, and while at Penn State Dunmore campus, he co-edited with Dr. Curtis Graber a resource book, Rhythmic Aspects of Behavior. He also served as president of the Northeast Pennsylvania Psychology Association. And then following his transfer to Penn State, the main campus at University Park, he initiated a positive psychology and well-being course and taught it for 30 years. Now, everyone, if you've been following our 2 years almost of these sessions, everything we're doing is tying in where lifestyle medicine meets positive psychology. So Dr. Brown is such an esteemed colleague to join us as he can share some of his findings and work from his work in positive psychology and well-being. Today, we have the grand pleasure to have Dr. Brown sharing how to improve nightly sleeping for effective daytime performance. So we're going to dive in just a moment. But as we get into the chat, people are saying hello. Yes, they're sleeping 7 to 8 hours straight. Oh, great. There's some people here that have connections with Penn State. Perfect. And we have some people on the East Coast. Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Again, if you have questions during the presentation, we invite you to type in the chat and we'll keep note of them. And we hope to leave about 10 minutes at the end for a brief Q&A with Dr. Brown to answer any of your questions regarding sleep. So, did you know we have an epidemic of sleep deprivation? It started about 100 years ago. Imagine, what was life like before we had artificial light, when we lived by candlelight? So imagine at the turn of the time where we had electricity that blessed us with more productivity, more hours of work and being able to spend time at home with our loved ones, seeing them with this wonderful light. Our great grandparents slept 1.5 to 2 hours longer than we do. So just thinking about that, in perhaps 1 or 2 generations, we've reduced our sleep by about 1.5 to 2 hours. And that's resulting in a lot of lifestyle related diseases. So let's go ahead and look at now, where are we with our sleep hygiene? And with that, I would love to go ahead and turn it over and welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Frederick Brown. Are you ready to join us?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
You are coming in loud and clear. Thank you for being here with us. We're excited to hear all about your research.
Okay. Thank you. To the people of the San Antonio area, I have visited your lovely city a couple of times for scientific research conventions. And now it's very pleasant to be able to talk with you. And thank you, Maggie, my esteemed colleague. So I want to talk to you about improving nightly sleep for more effective daytime performance. Let's see if I can now make things move. I'll see if I can open the slideshow completely. Yes, no. You have to realize to have life is to have rhythmicities, all kinds of them. This is the first sentence in the first chapter of the book that was written by Dr. Graeber and me back in 1982, but it seems to have some staying power because it was reproduced or reprinted in 2020 by Taylor and Francis. Now, what does this mean? Let's take a look.
Dr. Brown, I'm sorry, we still don't see your slides.
You do not see the slides?
No, not yet. We're just seeing your beautiful background.
I'm seeing them.
Try the screen share and then click on the PowerPoint.
Okay, let me.
And while he's getting that ready for us, we're going to be looking at stages of sleep. We're going to be looking at some tips. And if you did not get the handout from the research from Dr. Brown, we have some handouts to share with you. So make sure that you can email me at mgrueskin. I'll put it in the chat, mgrueskin@wellcoach.com, and we will get that to you.
Let me open this completely and see. Share screen.
Yes.
Okay, now let's see. I may have to.
You have to select what you're going to share. So click on the PowerPoint.
I'm trying to do that. Okay, let's see. No.
It looks like it's starting to work. There you go.
All right.
You're working. Perfect. And if you want to expand it, you can. Or
yes, I do.
Thank you so much. You're off and running.
Okay. This is just my background, but I want to go to this. This statement, to have life is to have rhythmicities. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Okay. As I just mentioned, this was the first chapter of this seminal text that came out, back in the early 80s. And so what I want to do is look at some of these rhythms of which we are all a part. From what I see on my screen is that part of this is blocked. Is that correct?
It's actually coming in fine.
Oh, okay. Okay, I guess it's just blocked in my part. There are a variety of rhythms. We look at Earth here in the middle, and we see that And we know that it rotates on a near 24-hour basis, but also around it is the moon that rotates on a 28.54 day cycle, which makes the tidal cycles about 12.4 hours. Anybody who's been to the beach knows that there are tidal cycles. And so the tide, the high and the low tides are not the same daily. But also the Earth rotates, well, really revolves around the sun 365 and a quarter days. Now, who cares? The thing is, life developed in a physical context of all kinds of rhythms. And this means that life has to adapt to those rhythms. And as highly developed biological entities, we have all kinds of mechanisms within us that allow us to respond to these constant rhythms that are changing. The circadian or the near 24-hour rhythm, we are pretty familiar with. This is part of the sleep-wake cycle. There's the twice daily tidal cycle that does not affect us as much, but except subtly. Tidal animals that live on the sea shore, must adapt to this. There also is a lunar or full moon cycle. And the fact that the menstrual cycle of primates, including humans, it approximates the lunar or full moon cycle is just not random, because there are many species of primates whose menstrual cycle is synchronized with the full moon cycle. And apparently that was the case with humans as well in the days, as Maggie was talking about, the days before we had such strong artificial illumination. Now it doesn't seem to be that way. There also is the annual solar cycle, which produces our seasons. There also is the 11-year sunspot cycle. There's another aspect. This relates to the circadian rhythm. And there are at least 3 natural sleep-wake patterns that humans have. And these are produced by our genes, but also environmental factors such as our social activity schedules, the degree of light exposure, whether they're long periods of daylight like in summertime, or extremely short periods of light like around December 21st. Which type are you? Are you a night owl? Do you like to stay up later? Do you find it a little difficult to wake up in the mornings? Or are you the cheery morning type lark, ready to go as soon as your eyes open and you jump out of bed, willing to begin all your daytime activities right away? I'm a morning type. My colleague, Dr. Lejam, is an evening type. And so we find that midday is the best time for us to carry on any deep conversations. Now, let's examine this. Although set early in life, our chronotype does have a bit of flexibility. And we see something that I'm sure parents of teenage kids are well aware of, is that their teenage kids like to stay up in the evening longer and sleep in the morning. This seems to be a developmental era for them, teenage years, because this preference for staying up late at night starts to drift back at about age 20. And we've got, well over 200,000 surveys of morningness, eveningness that we've collected here at Penn State over the last 20 plus years. We also see that about age 20 and thereafter, the circadian rhythm starts to drift slightly more towards morningness. And as people get older, they tend to be more willing to get up earlier. But apparently, we also reset our circadian rhythms, because when we talk about the circadian rhythm, we're talking about the rhythm that functions whether there is any light stimulus or not. And these were done by studies of subjects in deep caves in which they were allowed to set their own daily schedules. It turns out that the average daily rhythm, natural, free running, is 24.14 days. For morning type people, it seems to be a little shorter than that, a little less than 24. For evening type people, the natural free running circadian rhythm is more than 24 hours. And when you talk about extreme morning people or extreme evening people, we're talking about shortening or lengthening that circadian rhythm considerably beyond the average of 24.14. But apparently we reset our circadian rhythm each morning when we get up. So, and this, we do have that flexibility. This is the point I'm trying to make. This is why we're able to adjust to different time zones. Those of you who've done any jet traveling across the country or out of the country know that, or may have felt sleepiness at different times than the usual time. We see coming up this weekend is daylight saving time, and most people are able to make that adjustment without too much difficulty. However, the people who are going to suffer most are the teenagers and people who are extreme evening type people, because although they can go to bed late, it's going to be tougher for them to get up an hour earlier. And what has been suggested by the Sleep Research Society is that, let's see, today is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's suggested that you try to get to bed 15 minutes earlier for the next 3 to 4 days and get up 15 minutes earlier successively each of those days, so that when daylight saving time hits on Sunday, you will be pretty much adjusted. Now, if you're interested in which chronotype you are, I could send you by email a self-scoring copy of my basic language morning scale, and you can find out what your chronotype is. Let's get into sleep. It's one of our circadian biological rhythms, and it is vitally necessary for our physical and mental well-being. A generation ago, sleep was seen as a bad habit. Sleep is now recognized as necessary as good nutrition and exercise for complete health and happiness. We humans sleep nearly a third of our lifetime, so it must be important. And what are the purposes? To awaken physically repaired, because physical healing occurs in the first half of the night with the deepest part of sleep, and mentally alert because our tension seems to be reduced mostly at the last half of the sleeping. But how and or when we sleep are behavioral acts. And we see that it involves our experiences, what we're used to, the decisions we make about how much sleep we want to get, and information like this information. So there are the two questions: who taught you when to and how to sleep, and just how do you sleep? So let's take a look at some of the aspects of sleep behavior. We can look at the biology of sleep. We see that it's genetically controlled. Let's see if I can move this out of the way, because I am let's see. That's right in my way. Okay, there. Sleep is genetically controlled by the biological clock, and it determines our body's physiological functioning, including our core body temperature rhythm. And most people do not take their body temperature when they're feeling well. And so, like I have done with my students in the rhythms classes I've taught, I've asked them to take their body temperature, a plain old thermometer, every 2 hours from the time they first awaken until they're ready to go to sleep at night. And the original studies indicate that our lowest sleep is about 4 or 5 in the morning. Our lowest temperature, body temperature, is about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And that anticipates our awakening as it starts to rise. And so if we continue to take our body temperature across the day, we would find that it tends to peak later in the afternoon, early evening. And we see that that temperature can vary a full 2 to 4 degrees. I remember years ago, I thought I had, when I purchased thermometers, that something was wrong with them, because my temperature was seeming to be at 97 degrees. I didn't realize that I had a low body temperature and that it would not rise to 98.6 until late in the day. We realized that 98.6 is an average of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So that means that there are a lot of people that have normal body temperature rhythms that average well below 98.6 and above 98.6. That was true for my daughter when she was young, and if she was not feeling well and her body temperature was 98.6, we knew that she had a low-grade fever. So what is your average body temperature? We see that the sleep-wake cycle is a function of quite a few factors. You look in the lower left-hand corner, and we see that there are a series of genes, and you see by the names of them that they relate to how our body temperature our sleep-wake cycle is determined. Also, social time is extremely important. For animals, there are two things that are important, and that's their genetics, because you'll see in a moment, the table I will show you that the sleep-wake cycles differ greatly among animals. But for humans, not only is light important for determining our sleep-wake cycles, but our social schedules. Do we have to get up early in the morning to take care of obligations? Can we sleep in? What time do we go to bed? What time do we choose to go to bed or like to go to bed? And so these are things that animals don't have, but we as humans do have. And here is just a close-up of that rhythm. So you see that her oral temperature, depending upon if we're measuring it by Celsius or by Fahrenheit, it ranges this way every single day from the time we're born to the time we die. Now let's take a quick look. This looks very complicated, but you don't need to know much about it other than there are changes that occur, that systematic changes occur across each of our sleeps. Here we start at our brain. And this is electroencephalography. This is our brain functioning, very rapid, very active when we are awake. But when we rest, we close our eyes and just kick back, we see that we start producing more alpha waves. And those of us who are meditators try to reach this level of producing restful alpha waves. But as we begin to sleep, we see that there is a loss of the alpha waves, and there's a little more thinking that goes on here. It may be as we're going to sleep, we have thoughts of the day, and they're kind of intruding, but they're not as tight as they are when we're fully awake. And as we start to drop more into sleep, we may start to get kind of weird images. And this is when the sleep spindles occur, and this is called the K complex. I did napping studies with students in the laboratory. I put them in the other room on a cot and shut the door, and we'd have only intercommunication by phone between the two. And as my students and I watched the electroencephalography recording, all of a sudden we would see these and we would say, now the person is falling asleep. And so we would record that time as the time of the onset of sleep. As the person got into deeper and deeper sleep, then the waves started to get higher, but more synchronized, almost as if the brain was now finding a restful period of sleep. And all of a sudden, something happens. All of a sudden, it goes away. And we find that this recording looks a lot like the awake recording. And this is when we will awaken a person and say, what's going on? And they would say, I was dreaming. We find that when people get to this point, the greatest amount of time, when you awaken them, we see that this is one when they say they're sleeping, but also something else happens, and that is the thing called rapid eye movements. I don't know if you've ever seen a baby asleep, but often you can see their eyeballs moving underneath their eyelids. That's called the rapid eye movement, and we're able to measure that very simply. So we have this deep, slow wave sleep, and then we have the rapid eye movement sleep, in which so many times when a person is awake and they say, I was dreaming. But we also see something else. Sleep is very rhythmic. It goes through these levels to the deepest slow wave sleep. And you notice that most of this is occurring in the first half of the night. A little bit of rapid eye movement occurs. And these cycles are approximately 90 to 110 minutes. We tend to go down deeply, stay there, and then come up. And at about 90 to 110 minutes, we may have a brief dream or rapid eye movement. We may roll over, we may grunt, we may, toss the pillow out of our bed or something else, and then go back into a deep sleep for another 90 to 10 minutes, 110 minutes, and then come up to the rapid eye movement. But we see that the latter half of the night is associated mainly with more of the rapid eye movement and less of the deep sleep. So that if we awaken naturally, we usually awaken at the end or in a dream. And usually it's that dream that we remember best of our nightly dreaming. Here are typical hours of sleep that vary among various species. We see that we go from the giraffe and the horse and donkey, elephant, we see that they sleep exceedingly little. Well, keep in mind that these are very large animals, and they have to spend so much of their daytime eating. And so the time awake is spent obtaining nutrition. We see where adult humans are, and that is on the kind of the short side, 8 hours of sleep. When we look then at the chimpanzee and the baboon, both apes, they're sleeping 1 to 2 hours more than we do. And we'll continue down and we see that the domestic dog and domestic cat are sleeping more during the day, chipmunks outside, and we get to the little brown bat and whoops, we get to, let me back up. It's blocking here. I can't quite see what it is, but it looks like some little mouse. All right. As we age, our sleep shortens and changes. Now we take a look at this diagram. We see this is a waking time. Now this is days of birth. This is the newborn. We see that almost half of it is in this rapid eye movement sleep, in which humans, of all the animals, take the longest time to develop their brain. That is a long, what's called encephalization. And so apparently a lot of brain development occurs while we are asleep. Where we see this then changes and it becomes less, 6 to 12 months, 2 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 13 years. And we see that around age, the early teen years onward, that the amount of rapid eye movement sleep is about the same. What reduces over lifetime is the deep, slow wave, healing, physically restorative sleep. Now, yeah, you should note that these sleep times of, let's say, 8 hours of sleep for human adults, this is actuarial. In other words, you take a bunch of people and you measure their sleep and you see this is what they're getting. This is not ideal. We want to take a look at what is considered to be ideal sleep by the National Sleep Foundation. We look at adults aged 26 to 64, 79 hours recommended. Older adults, later older than 65, 7 to 8 hours. Also, apparently women, young women in their reproductive years need approximately 1 hour more of sleep than do men. We see that there are genetic differences here for some, and there are short sleepers and there are long sleepers who are naturally that way. We see what can be considered acceptable, but we see less than 6 hours and more than 10 hours is not recommended. That suggests that there may be something else going on besides natural sleep. And for older adults, less than 5 hours and more than 9 hours would be considered something questionable. Now, there's a bidirectionality of the sleep relationship. Sleep is on one aspect, and how you feel is very important, because if a person wakes up in the morning, regardless of how much sleep they had, and say, I feel good, I feel rested, I'm ready to start my day with a lot of vim and vigor, then it suggests that the amount of sleep that they received was adequate. And we also know that when people feel good about how their sleep is and how they function during the day, they bring this back to bed with them in the evening. And rather than fret about, well, I guess I'm not going to get a good night's sleep tonight, another lousy night, they're saying, I had a good day today. I felt good when I woke up. I'm feeling good now. Let me get another good night's sleep. So that's when we're talking about the bidirectionality of sleep and how we feel. For older adults, we see that the sleep cycle changes. Now, this is for the young adult. This was the diagram I showed you earlier. Here's for older 60-plus-year-old, and we see what's the obvious thing. Obvious thing is that it seems to be more fragmented, that the sleep, the 90 to 110-minute sleep-wake cycles are much less. There are many more pieces of sleep, and we also see that there's not as much slow wave, deep sleep, which is the rejuvenating, healing aspect. Also, there's not as much of the rapid eye movement sleep. And that's the part that tends to reduce our psychological tensions of the day. Also, it's very important for memory work. And here's another point. With young adults, particularly college students, many of them brag that, oh, I only get 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. Well, what is happening is it's cutting off periods of the rapid eye movement. And these are the periods when memory is consolidated. So if they're studying the night before for an exam or whatever, and then they get to bed, and then they have a short night of sleep, then all the stuff that they've been studying does not get consolidated as well. Essentially, they've wasted some of their time, particularly if in the afternoon they then take an hour or so nap, because the nap then won't help the consolidation that if they had put that on the latter part of the night's sleep, they would have had more consolidation and their studying would have been more effective. We see that about 44% of older people experience one or more nights of nightly symptoms of insomnia, at least a few nights a week. And there are two types of insomnia: onset and sleep maintenance. And we see that in the older adult, there's a lot more awakening, the difficulty staying asleep after spontaneous nightly awakenings. Often, but not always, it's related to underlying medical or mental conditions. And these here are some of the poor sleeping causes. Medications. Alcohol. Yeah, alcohol may get you to sleep, but it causes your later sleep to be disrupted. Bronchodilators, beta blockers, caffeine. If you drink caffeine before you go to bed, you don't go into the deepest part of the early stages of sleep. Only you don't know it. People say to me, oh, I have no problem with caffeine. I can drink coffee before I go to bed. Yeah, but what they don't realize is that they're not getting the deep, restorative physical sleep. There are other aspects here. Corticosteroids, decongestants, nicotine. Nicotine is a stimulant, stimulating antidepressants and thyroid hormones. There are primary sleep problems that are related specifically to sleep issues, and that's apnea. And this is when a person's sleeping channels are blocked. The tongue may fall back in the throat, and they awaken coughing, gasping for air. And with people with severe apnea, they may awaken coughing like this a couple of hundred times a night. And this is very hard on the heart. Narcolepsy, and this is a neurologic problem which a person easily, spontaneously falls asleep. There are cases of people who have been playing baseball, they get up to bat, they're so excited, and all of a sudden they fall over asleep. Or people having narcolepsy, they're in the process of making love, and they just fall asleep. And then there's restless leg syndrome, and that's a very difficult one because the neurologic issues apparently have not yet been worked out. There are other things. Noise. I mean, we had the garbage trucks, or excuse me, the recycling trucks pass by the house early this morning, clanging and banging. So we realized that every Wednesday morning, we're going to be awakened with the work they have to do. If lights are on at night, and this is what powerful lighting does to us. If you're having to shift work or caring for dependents and pets, these are all going to have an effect. We see that some of the poor sleeping effects. It weakens the immune system if you don't get enough sleep. It can produce increased body weight because it affects the digestive enzymes. And it can produce mental function deficiencies because of lack of the rapid eye movement and dreaming sleep. But also that produces increased probability of things such as clumsiness, or even negligent driving. The International Chronobiology Society has shown research that indicates that there are more fender benders Monday mornings than any other morning, because people are still sleepy from the fact that they've probably gone to bed late Friday nights, gone to bed late Saturday nights, slept in both mornings, and then when they have to get to bed at the usual time on the Sunday night, they can't get to sleep because their circadian rhythm has already tried to shift to their new sleeping pattern. So they wake up sleepy in the morning, and they're more fender benders. Okay, you have the handouts for better sleeping, so we can quickly go through those. We see exercise at regular times each day, but not within 3 hours of bedtime, because if you're doing physical exercising, that's very stimulating. It's also suggested that you get outside in the midday, cloudy or sunny, for 30 minutes or so, because even on the darkest, stormiest, grayest days, it is brighter outside, believe it or not, than in most houses that are artificially illuminated. Sleep and napping habits. Follow a regular sleep-wake schedule, even on weekends, to maintain your body's regular daily circadian rhythmicity so that you're just as sharp Monday mornings as you would be Wednesday or Thursday mornings. Otherwise, the nighttime sleepiness will vary, causing sleep onset insomnia. If you nap, try to just do power napping, because if you're sleeping more than a half hour, let's say an hour or two, that means you're not getting enough sleep at night. And it also can produce sleep inertia, which are very groggy when you awaken. And then you kind of have to work yourself out of that and not be functioning very well. Eating and drinking for good sleeping. It's suggested that you eat, not closer than 4 hours before your bedtime, because you want to, have the digestion occurring quite well by the time you go to sleep. Maybe a little bit of carbohydrate snacking at night is okay. Avoid using caffeine products within 6 hours of sleep, because caffeine has a half-life of 3 to 5 hours. So in 3 to 5 hours, you've still got the caffeine, and in 3 to 5 hours, you got half of that. And that decreases the early, deep, slow wave restorative sleep. Alcohol just before sleeping may make it easier to fall asleep, but it decreases the later rapid eye movement sleep. And also to reduce having to get up during the night to go to the bathroom, you want to limit the quantities of your liquids. I mean, if you're adequately hydrated morning and afternoon and dinner time, then nothing's going to happen if you have exceedingly little water or any other liquid between then and bedtime. You can just sip a little bit. Develop a pre-hour bedtime wind down routine to signal the body it's time to sleep. Here's part of the conditioning we can choose to do. Stop smartphone blue light stimulation. In other words, get off your phone at least a half hour, if not an hour, before you plan on going to sleep. You read a light book or watch something light and entertaining, nothing that's heavy or hostile. Listen to soothing music, soak in a warm bath or shower. In the bedroom, make the bedroom dark with light blocking shades. You want it cool when you go to sleep. You want it quiet. Have a comfortable mattress and pillows. You, again, this is conditioning. Use the bedroom and bed only for sleeping and sex. And don't do a lot of reading, watching TV, or eating while in bed. If you have cold feet, you can put on socks. You have pets or children, keep them off the bed while you're sleeping. If you have a restless bed partner, consider sleeping in a separate bed or room. And if you can't sleep, then you might want to be considerate and go to another bed to preserve your partner's sleep. While you're in bed, shift your daytime thoughts to neutral or pleasant ones, such as be aware of your breathing and slow counting breaths, repeat a continuous short poem, prayer, or mantra, follow visual images behind your closed eyelids, thinking about, this is one, think about 3 positive things that occurred today that made you smile. But if you're not sleepy, in 15 minutes, particularly if you have a bed partner, get out of bed, go someplace else until you get sleepy, then come back to bed. All right, with all this preparation, now that you know something about sleep and its importance, what can you expect? You can expect occasionally that a night of sleep will be disruptive for whatever reason, perhaps 1 out of 10 nights. And that way you don't need to feel angry, frustrated, or depressed, because bringing those to bed with you will not help you fall asleep. If your sleep is chronically disrupted, then, note these times and the problems for several days, then discuss them with a physician. A good night's sleep is possible, very much so, with pleasant dreams. Thank you very much, folks, and I hope you learned a little bit from this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. This is Maggie coming back here. If you want to stop your screen share, then we'll come back and visit for a few more minutes as we wrap up our hour together. That was amazing. Oh my goodness, everyone. Dr. Frederick Brown, Penn State University, sharing his wisdom, decades of research into a thing we do every day. And yet, if we still face and struggle with getting good quality sleep on a regular basis, I encourage you to jot down some of the ideas that Dr. Brown shared with us and put them in the chat. What stood out for you guys that is your number one takeaway, either something new that you learned or something that you will be practicing, especially now as we get ready to look at the daylight savings. So a quick question in the chat was, when is a sleep study recommended? So Dr. Brown, would you like to address that?
Yes, that's one of the last things I mentioned. Is like when you are not sleeping well and you feel miserable and you wake up every morning and you're saying, I am not sleeping well, then it's time to find a sleep medicine specialist. Sleep medicine has become a relatively recent subspecialty of medicine, and major hospitals usually have a sleep laboratory in which you go in there for a night or two, and they will hook you up, do all these electroencephalography recordings to see just what's happening at night.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. And to reach Dr. Brown for the basic languages morningness balm scale, please email Dr. Brown at f3b@psu.edu. Dr. Brown, thank you so much for sharing that. I took so many notes, and as you connected us all the way back to the beautiful view of the rhythms of life and the chronotypes, again, recognizing that we're unique. We all sleep, right? But we're all a little bit unique. So that was beautiful. And I just loved how you brought out the sleep phases. And everybody talks about deep sleep and REM sleep, but thank you for highlighting the importance of that slow wave sleep and the differences of how that changes from our youth, our midlife, and as we get into the sunset of life, the fall time of life, right? And so very curious about REM. because you might have heard of the glymphatic system. Have you come across that in your research, and how it shows up in that later portion of the REM sleep, as you're saying about how it processes the thoughts during the REM cycle. So the glymphatic system is similar to our lymphatic system, and it opens up vessels in the brain only during that REM sleep, so that it detoxifies and flushes out all the metabolic wastes from the thinking process. And so when we don't do the REM, if we cut out on the REM sleep, as you said most teenagers might do as we're studying, right? Then we lose out on sort of getting rid of the old thought byproducts, and we wake up feeling clogged in the head or not refreshed. So that's one of the newest fields of research that I came across, and I was just wondering if you had that in your research that you've come across, or wanted to comment on that.
No, I know very little of that, other than it's known that the REM sleep periods tend to reduce psychological tensions. So it may be that this is just getting more detail of exactly what's going on and how it's being done. Yes, but also consolidation, particularly if you've been studying the evening before, to maximize efficiency is to get sufficient sleep. I would suggest that people might want to try sometime to see how much sleep they really need on days that they're off, or weekends when they go to bed at their normal times, and see how long they just do sleep in the morning. That'll give a pretty good idea of how much sleep you need, rather than what the clock says or what your schedule says.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. And with that, I want to thank everybody, as before we turn it over to Brooke to get ready for daylight savings time. It starts March 13th here in the US, and it runs all the way through November 6th. So as Dr. Brown said, just start now, 15 minutes earlier at night for the next few days, and we'll get ready to match it this year. Thanks so much, Dr. Brown. It's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you all, folks, very much.